What would you say if a cop walked up to your window and demanded your ID right now? If you say the wrong thing, you can give away rights you never had to lose. If you say the right thing, you can protect yourself without sounding rude. Hit subscribe right now because what you learn here could save you from a huge mistake during your next stop. Like this video now so you can find it fast when your brain freezes in a real moment. Most people have no idea that show me your ID can mean very different things depending on where you are, what you're doing, and why the officer stopped you. If you're driving, the rules are not the same as if you're walking. If you're a passenger, the rules can change again. Let me show you exactly how to tell the difference before you talk yourself into trouble. You're about to learn the simple phrase that forces clarity, the follow-up question that stops a fishing trip, the line that shuts down extra questioning, and the exact mistake people make when they try too hard to be nice. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and you see the same pattern every time. Drivers panic, passengers guess, pedestrians overtalk. Then the stop gets bigger because nobody asked the one question that matters first. Here's the reality. You do not want to treat every police request like it's the same. That is where people get burned. Sometimes you really do have to identify yourself. Sometimes you do not. Sometimes police need a real legal reason to demand your name. Sometimes they are just testing whether you'll comply without thinking. You feel pressure, so you start handing things over before you even know what the rule is. You reach for your wallet. You start explaining where you're going. You start trying to prove you're harmless. That is the wrong mindset for you. Your goal is not to win them over with chatter. Your goal is to figure out what you are legally required to do only that, and stop there. That one shift can save you from giving away way more than your name. The first tactic is the phrase in the title, and you need to memorize it tonight. Here's exactly what you say. Officer, am I legally required to identify myself right now? Word for word. Keep your voice calm. Keep your hands visible. Ask it exactly like that. Why does that line work for you so well? Because it forces the whole moment into the open. The officer now has to make clear whether this is a legal order or just a request. That matters because the answer can change based on your situation. If you're driving and you were lawfully stopped, you usually do have to show your driver's license. That is normal. If you're walking down the street, the answer can be very different. If you're a passenger, it can also be different depending on the state and the reason for the stop. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. In Hiibel v. Sixth Judicial District Court, the court said a state can require you to give your name during a lawful stop if that state has a stop and identify law. Plain English, if police have real legal grounds to stop you and your state has that kind of law, you may have to identify yourself, but Brown v. Texas cut the other way. In that case, the court said police could not stop a man and punish him for refusing to identify himself when they had no real reason to suspect him of a crime. Plain English? Police do not get to demand your identity just because they feel like it. That is why your phrase is powerful. You are not refusing. You are not arguing. You are asking whether the law actually requires you to comply. If the answer is yes, you comply with what is required. If the answer is vague, you do not fill in the blanks for them. Bad way, most drivers say, sure, here's everything, and start handing over extra cards, cash, and explanations. Then the stop gets wider and the officer starts digging. Good way. Smart drivers say, officer, am I legally required to identify myself right now? Then the officer has to be clear and you only do what the law actually requires. Watch what happens when you use that line. The pressure shifts. Instead of you guessing, the officer has to define the moment. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it shows you were trying to follow the law, not fight the law. That matters later if the stop turns into a bigger argument. It shows you asked for clarity before acting. You also need to understand the hidden benefit. That question slows you down, and slowing down protects you. A lot of people make their biggest mistake in the first 5 seconds. They hear authority and they start obeying everything, even things that were never required. Your question puts a speed bump in that process. It gives you a second to think. It gives the officer a chance to explain, and it keeps you from volunteering more than you had to. This is 100% legal. You are allowed to ask if you are legally required to identify yourself. You are not cursing. You are not resisting. You are asking for the rule before you act. That is smart, and you need to get comfortable doing it. Have you ever had an officer ask for your ID when you were not driving? Drop a comment below and tell me if you knew the answer changed by situation. The second tactic is what you say when the stop starts feeling loose, weird, or endless. You look at the officer and say this: am I being detained or am I free to leave? Those exact words. Memorize that line too. Here's why this helps you. A lot of police encounters stay vague on purpose. You're standing there. Nobody tells you if you're free to go. The officer keeps asking questions. You assume you have to stay, so you stay. Then 10 more minutes pass, and now the stop has turned into an investigation. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. If you are not being lawfully detained, you do not have to stand there and keep feeding the conversation. Terry v. Ohio is the case that created the basic rule for investigative stops. In plain English, police need reasonable suspicion, which means real facts pointing to possible crime, not just a gut feeling. Brown v. Texas also matters here because it reminds you that police cannot hold you and demand identity without a proper legal basis. So when you ask if you are being detained or free to leave, you force the officer to either point to a legal reason or let you go. Bad way, most drivers say, I guess I'll stay if you need me, and keep answering random questions. Then the stop drags on, and the officer keeps building a case. Good way, smart drivers say, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Then the officer has to make the situation clear before you say another word. This is 100% legal. You are allowed to ask whether you are free to go. You are not being disrespectful. You are asking for the line between a real detention and a voluntary conversation. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it changes a fuzzy encounter into a clear one. Once things are clear, your choices get clearer too. Now let me give you the big warning here. If the officer says you are being detained, do not walk away. Do not argue on the roadside. Do not get cute. Your win is not in making a speech. Your win is in making them say out loud whether they have legal authority. Once they answer, you know the lane you are in. If they say you are free to go, you leave calmly. If they say you are detained, then you stop volunteering and move to the next tactic. Watch what happens when you combine Tactic 1 and Tactic 2. First, you ask if you are legally required to identify yourself. Then, if things keep dragging, you ask if you are being detained or free to leave. Now you have forced two separate kinds of clarity. What must you do, and can they keep you there? Those two answers can protect you from a lot of bad guessing. The third tactic is what you say after you comply with the basic legal stuff, but the officer keeps fishing for more. Here's exactly what you say. I will comply with lawful orders, but I'm not answering questions. That line is short, calm, and strong. Listen closely because this is critical. A lot of people think the danger is only in refusing. It is not. The danger is in talking too much after you already gave what was legally required. Maybe you had to show your license because you were driving. Fine. That does not mean you also have to explain where you came from, who is in your car, why you were nervous, what is in your bag, or whether you have ever been arrested. Those are different things. Your ID requirement does not become an all-access pass into your life. Here's the reality. Police are trained to use normal conversation to gather evidence. They may sound friendly. They may act casual. They may say they are just trying to help you out, but every extra answer you give can open another door. Where are you headed turns into who are you meeting? Then why are you sweating? Then do you mind if I take a look? That chain starts because you kept talking after the required part was already done. This is where your line helps you. You are not refusing everything. You are telling them the boundary. You will follow lawful orders, but you are not giving a free interview on the side of the road. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection when you feel the stop slipping out of the traffic lane and into the investigation lane. And yes, you can say it politely. Tone matters. Your words should be firm. Your body should stay calm. Bad way, most drivers say, sure, ask whatever you want. I've got nothing to hide. Then they talk themselves into suspicion they never had before. Good way, smart drivers say, I will comply with lawful orders, but I'm not answering questions. Then the officer gets less to work with and your rights stay stronger. A lot of people mess this up because they want to seem cooperative, but being cooperative does not mean being unlimited. You can comply with the law without becoming your own witness. That is the whole point. If you had to show ID, show it. If you had to hand over license and registration, hand them over. But once the officer steps past that and tries to turn the stop into a chat room, your line matters. And if you are wondering whether this sounds too lawyer-like, it does not. It sounds controlled, it sounds mature, it sounds like someone who understands that required documents and optional questions are not the same thing. That difference can save you. If you've made it this far, you're serious about protecting your rights. Show me by hitting that like button because the next part is where most people wreck everything. The fourth tactic is for the moment when pressure gets heavy and you feel yourself wanting to explain. Here's exactly what you say. I want a lawyer and I am remaining silent. That is your emergency brake. You use it when the stop turns serious, when you think arrest may be coming, or when questions keep getting sharper and sharper. Why is this so important for you? Because once stress hits, your mouth gets dangerous. You start trying to fix things, you start guessing, you start filling silence because silence feels scary. That is how people hand police little pieces that later become a big case. Your lawyer can speak later. Your panic should not speak now. Miranda v. Arizona is the case people know from movies, but the real lesson is simple. If police are questioning you in custody, you can say you want a lawyer and you are staying silent. Then you should actually stop talking. Not mostly. Fully. No side stories. No just one thing. No can I explain. No you've got it wrong. Once you invoke, you stay quiet. Bad way. Most drivers say, maybe I should get a lawyer, but let me explain first. Then they keep talking and make the problem worse. Good way. Smart drivers say, I want a lawyer and I am remaining silent. Then the talking stops on your side, which is exactly where your protection starts. You need to remember one more thing. This line does not erase a lawful order. If you are told to step out, step out. If you are told to hand over a license during a lawful traffic stop, hand it over. But if the encounter turns into questioning that could hurt you, you stop narrating your life. That is the move. Short sentence, clear boundary, quiet mouth. Now let's pull the law together so you really understand what protects you. Hiibel says that during a lawful stop and in places with stop and identify laws, police can require your name. That is why you do not use some fake internet script that claims you never have to identify yourself. Brown v. Texas says police cannot just stop you and demand ID with no real reason. That is why your first question matters so much. Terry v. Ohio says police need reasonable suspicion, which means specific facts, not a random hunch, before they can hold you for an investigative stop. And Miranda reminds you that if the encounter becomes serious and custodial, your silence and your request for a lawyer matter. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. The law is not always show ID, and it is not never show ID. The real rule is narrower, and that is why your phrases matter. First, find out if the law requires ID in your situation. Second, find out if you are actually being detained. Third, comply with lawful orders, but stop answering optional questions. Fourth, if it turns serious, ask for a lawyer and stay quiet. That is the clean path. That is the smart path. And that is the path that keeps you from making a bad moment worse. Now picture this, because you need to hear how it sounds in real life. You're driving home after work, you change lanes a little late, lights come on behind you. The officer walks up and asks for your license. That part is easy. If you were lawfully stopped while driving, you usually do have to produce it. But then the officer looks at your passenger, points at them, and says, I need your ID too. Then he looks back at you and starts asking where you're both coming from, where you're going, and why you look nervous. The wrong way happens every day. Your passenger panics and starts digging through a wallet without asking any questions. You start talking fast. We're just coming from my cousin's place. We didn't do anything. We're just tired. Then more questions come. Now the officer is curious because you sound scared. Your passenger hands over way more than needed. The whole car is now in interview mode. Let me show you exactly how the right way sounds. You hand over your license because you are the driver and that is required. Your passenger stays calm and says, Officer, am I legally required to identify myself right now? If the officer keeps it vague, your passenger does not guess. If the stop keeps stretching, you ask, am I being detained or am I free to leave? If the officer starts turning the whole thing into an interrogation, you say, I will comply with lawful orders, but I'm not answering questions. If things get serious, you finish with, I want a lawyer and I am remaining silent. Bad way. Most drivers say, we'll answer anything you want. Then the stop grows. The questions pile up and you lose control fast. Good way. Smart drivers say, Officer, am I legally required to identify myself right now? Then they force clarity, limit the stop, and protect themselves step by step. That is the whole game for you. Not attitude, not drama, not fake tough guidelines from the internet. Clarity, calm, limits. You do what the law requires. You refuse to do more just because pressure makes you want to please. That is how you protect yourself in the real world. Coming next week, what to say when cops ask to search your phone. Subscribe because that video could save your entire private life from being opened on the side of the road. So lock these 4 moves into your head. First, ask, Officer, am I legally required to identify myself right now? Second, if things drag, ask, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Third, say, I will comply with lawful orders, but I'm not answering questions. Fourth, if it gets serious, say, I want a lawyer and I am remaining silent. Let me show you exactly why this works in one sentence. You stop guessing, you stop oversharing, and you force the encounter back into clear legal lines. Hit subscribe so you catch the phone search video next week. Smash that like button if this just made you rethink every traffic stop you've ever had. And drop a comment telling me which line you're going to memorize first. Stay safe out there.